I am pretty confident that most Shinobi fans would likely say, although Shadow Dancer isn't a patch on the original game, it's still a good game. If by the chance you have never heard of Shadow Dancer, then it's a sequel to Shinobi which released 2 years afterwards, again released by Sega in 1989. So Shadow Dancer is a platforming hack and slash game where in this sequel to Shinobi, we are accompanied with a K9 which attacks enemies for us. If they pose a threat, we set the K9 on them and then we can take them down. The main weapon in this game is of course a shuriken, and up close to enemies we can hit them down with a sword. Both of these weapons are unlimited, although we do have magic to use too, which we can use 3 times. The aim of the game is to get through each level through defusing time bombs. The control mechanics are the same as Shinobi and virtually controls the same too. Only with the addition of having the dog here, in which we can use by crouching down and hitting an attack button. There are 4 different missions in this game, each comprising of a few levels. The final level in each stage contains a boss. As like any successful arcade game, we of course have many home conversions. So today we are checking out and ranking from worst to best which home conversion is the next best thing to Sega's 1989 arcade classic Shadow Dancer. I'm going to add just here, the Mega Drive or Sega Genesis version isn't the same game as the arcade release, although some people will likely ask this anyways. Let's see who has made it to this part of the intro. I will also warn you here that every version minus just one was released by US Gold. You heard it, US Gold. Shadow Dancer, the Secret of Shinobi for the Sega Master System is a strange one. It was a European power release only, which was a direct arcade port, but randomly added the Secret of Shinobi to the title, which is the same title and even the box art that the Mega Drive and Sega Genesis got too. The strange thing is that they are both very different games. The 16-bit Mega Drive release is actually a totally different game altogether in fact. So what can I say about Shadow Dancer for the Master System? Well, all I will say is that it is certainly miles better than Cyber Shinobi, but not much really. Is it great? Well, not really. Firstly then, we have no K9 at all here, as you can see in the gameplay. You're going this alone. The moment we start level 1, we are bombarded with 5 enemies who throws knives at us, and these are very quick too. Now, I did notice that on a few occasions, these actually went through me, so hit collision detection is pretty way off here. Secondly, we have randomly got fires on the floor, which you need to jump over. Thirdly, we seem to have alien invasion going on with this version too. Enemies' heads are green. I really have no idea what this was about. Finally, one of the most irritating things above everything is not being able to scroll back at all. So if you happens to miss a bomb, you physically cannot go back to get it. You scroll one way and one way only. After the first level, we should then go straight to level 2, which is of course outside of the airport. Not here though, we immediately go straight to the boss, in which there is so little maneuver room to avoid his projectiles, that defeating him is ridiculously hard as it is so crammed. Really, I just gave up here and moved on. Just remember, this was nowhere near as terrible as the Cyber Shinobi, so at least this game does have that. As we play the Commodore 64 release, we open the game with a pitiful sound of very slow footsteps tapping away as we walk through the airport. Shinobi is looking particularly strange here. A very small and very slim looking sprite with a K9 that looks like he could do with some feeding. Now, firstly, we do have some fairly average parallax scoring for the outside scenery of the airport, which looks okay. I mean, for this era, graphics used here aren't that bad. There is no image for a plane at all outside though. Literally, just as we exit the first level, we see a very small airplane, which is quite pitiful. It's the gameplay and actions of enemies which are the big issue here. We get no health bar, and once we are hit, we have to start right back at the beginning of the level again, pretty much for most of the versions here. This can be a serious annoyance. This version of Shadow Dancer is so slow that walking through the same level over and over again just gets very tedious, very quickly too. We have no music here, and the sound effects sound like sound effects used from an early 1980s Commodore 64 game, rather than something being released in 1991. Going back to the visual side of things, we don't get a map with this release either, although we do get a fairly decent opening with the HUD slide across the screen. So we start level 2 with what looks like a Concorde in the background, and literally 2 seconds in, a very annoying enemy comes right behind us. There is no jump into higher point here, where in the arcades game we jump on cargo containers, and we exit the stage on a conveyor belt rather than the stairs leading to an airplane. The first boss is fairly easy here too. Although the boss normally is bigger than Shinobi, the boss in this version literally dwarfs Shinobi. Letting off magic here is fairly abysmal, and no fancy animation used here like the arcades game at all. The controls feel very clunky here. It's just not very nice to control at all. Wooden, so to speak. I found when jumping to avoid bullets, I would press jump to do it, but it wouldn't respond immediately, but a nanosecond later, which caused several deaths. The ZX Spectrum's port of Shadow Dancer, released in 1991, of course by US Gold, it was available for both 48K and 128K Spectrums. Now, clearly a visually impressive game for its time, this one was going to be a challenge to port this over to a 1982 48K Spectrum. We have a nice theme to start the game with, where we can select keyboard or Kempston's controls. I'll use Kempston for this. It's not actually as bad to control as I was thinking it was going to be. It took a little while when jumping down to lower and upper levels, where down and action buttons need to be pressed in quick order to make this happen. Shooting shurikens works okay. Setting off magic, although a little basic, and no quick cutscene of Shinobi's face. All we get here is a few squiggles of lightning strikes. We don't get a map of the stage we're about to enter either here, which was a bit of a letdown considering this could have been easily done here. We get no music here at all, just some very basic sound effects. Controlling the K9 is pretty easy too. Keep joystick downwards whilst quickly tapping the action button. Your K9 then attacks just fine. Now, as I made it to the second level in Mission 1, there was no background visuals at all here. No airplane, no nothing. I then finished the level with walking up some stairs, but still no airplane in sight. It was like a stairway to heaven. All in all, this was a tough version of Shadow Dancer for the Spectrum. Clearly let down by the hardware that really shouldn't have been taken on a game like Shadow Dancer at this point. Even with cutback elements, it just wasn't very good at all. Thankfully, in 2022, there was a remaster of this for the Spectrum 128K, which improved on several things, which is worth checking out. I am pretty sure that the Amstrad CPC won the best version of the 8-bit computers, although not brilliant by any means. It's more on the ZX Spectrum side than the bizarre Commodore 64 version. I'd likely say that this was very much like the Spectrum game, but just in colour of course. This looks fairly pixelated, but like I say, this is likely the best one here for the 8-bits. And remember, games back in the day wasn't played on a flat screen TV. They were designed for the current technology at the time, which is of course CRT or dedicated monitors. We actually have more of a thorough image of where we are here. It's an airport, and we know this because this version makes it very obvious with planes outside as we walk through the airport. US Gold released this port also in 1991 with everything else. In terms of the lack of airplane outside of level 2, this is much like the ZX Spectrum version here. There isn't anything. The boss section is also very similar. My guess is that either the Spectrum version or this version was ported and used on the other machine. Nothing out of the ordinary for developers to do this back in the day with these two particular computers. This one also only comes with sound effects too, but all in all, I would rank this higher than Spectrum's as literally the same game but only in colour. Finally, we have arrived to a conversion where it is more of a full arcade experience, but this comes at the expense of an absolute racket that this game makes. At this point, I had to turn the volume down, and will do so with editing this version too. Normally when playing a game, it can be annoying having to start again once dying. In this case, I was more concerned about the noise this made when dying. The dog barking also made my eardrums bleed, I think. So as a game, it's okay. It's certainly an improvement over everything else so far. I wouldn't even say it's because this is a 16-bit conversion rather than a mere 8-bit. The truth is, US schools who release these games were notorious for releasing terrible games. I think that is widely accepted at this point. The game controls fairly well, spacebar releases magic, and the usual fire button and joystick combination to jump up to higher and lower levels. Something this ST version did have, which was a very good background for level 2. Although not mind-blowing, it was actually nice to see something in the background here. I made it to the first boss, as in all of these versions, let some magic off, threw around 6 shurikens at him and he died. He threw nothing at me, so not sure if this was some kind of unfinished boss here as a rush release. Something that could have been added, which wasn't, was some parallax scrolling in the background. We did have music here though, rather than just bleak sound effects which 8-bit computer versions had. Of course, this is when it wasn't being drowned out by ear-piercing sound effects. It wasn't too bad. I will end on a high note here for this version. I found the bonus stage particularly good. It looked much like the arcade game too. Let's take everything that the Atari ST conversion had and make it a little better. So firstly, with this Commodore Amiga release, the scrolling and movement is fairly smooth here. It is much brighter to look at too. Regretfully, even though the Amiga was fully capable of doing parallax scrolling, this didn't have any, which is pretty pitiful considering its older brother, the Commodore 64, actually did this. One bonus that I was really grateful with this version of the game was the actual sounds. The music was average and the canine barking sounds and dying sounds too was done properly, so no longer did my ears bleed. It's almost the same scenario which the Spectrum and Amstrad version had, virtually the same game but just a little better on another platform. Is this a great game or even a great version of Shadow Dancer? Hell no. I don't think any system had a decent home conversion, but working through each trashy version told me that out of everything, the Amiga likely had the best version. I warned you at the start of this video that US School to release some terrible games, and its license for releasing Shadow Dancer on multiple platforms is pretty much a testament of this. I am also baffled as to why Sega's own version for the Sega Master System was so bad too. And that's it for ranking every Shadow Dancer home conversion today. So which pitiful release did you have? Was you happy with your Commodore 64 release? Personally, like I was saying, I think all of these were pretty bad, and in fact it's likely the worst home conversions of a particular arcade game I've ever done in this series. But anyways, as always, let us know what you played back in the day. Did you actually play this one in the arcade? I don't actually remember this one in the arcade. I personally played the Mega Drive version on my brother's Sega back in the day. But anyways, until next time, thanks for watching.